the first topic, well, the first and only topic, the one we're just digging into here, right? Is does the meritocracy exist? And either way, whether you think it does exist or doesn't exist, what are its effects on society? All right. So I will start with Clav. What do you, first, we should probably define a meritocracy. Which one of you would like to do that? All right.
I feel like we're going to be debating on that.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Okay. All right. Never mind. Clav, go ahead.
I mean, I guess we could say like very like a very loose definition that we could like play with a lot is a meritocracy is one in which like society rewards people based on merit. So like you get positions and jobs based on merit. Like most of the time the things like merit we can like define that as well, but you would like you would get rewarded and you're able to like get positions, get jobs and stuff. Most of the time it's talked about in the workforce based on like the things that you do and not the people that you know.
Okay. All right. Let me start with you, Clav.
Yeah. So for me, I guess I'm going to be kind of in the middle here. I think that there's a portion of society that the meritocracy exists for, and then like other extremities of society it doesn't really exist for. So for example, like people who are in who seem to be more in like a middle class area, they have a tendency to go up or down based on whatever it is that they do, where people who are in lower income brackets, higher income brackets, their success seems to be tied more to parents' income or parents' wealth, things like that. We can get into the data and things like that later, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Let's go to Matt Lad.
So I think that I'm going to break the meta a little bit and say that what constitutes merit is somewhat subjective rather than objective. So with that in mind, you could argue that meritocracy exists in a multitude of ways. But that being said, I think that we live in a society that's predominantly connection-based, and then after connection, and then maybe after demographic, we get to the merit as like a value. So I don't necessarily think that we live in one, although I guess if we consider personal connection some form of merit, you could argue that we do.
Okay. Doobie.
Okay. So my definition for like a meritocracy would be a society in which like everybody, no matter their start in life, no matter what the background is, has a chance to succeed based on their own merits. Right. I think that's what I think of when I think of meritocracy. Now, I don't know if it's possible to have a pure meritocracy where everybody's starting at some like ground level, same advantages, same disadvantages. And then, they need to work hard to get to where they want, because, people have connections. As someone already said, they have like some people are just naturally gifted in some areas. And maybe the thing that you're gifted at is not something that society really wants at the time. Right. So even if you do have merit and you working hard toward this one thing, that's not something that society is interested in. So you're still broke as fuck. Right. So I don't think we can really get to a pure meritocracy. I don't know if that's like possible. But that being said, I do think that we should still teach that that merit and meritocracy are good things that we should strive for. Right. Even if it's an unreachable goal, because I think that that belief has led to a lot of really good things. I think some negative things, right? But I think it's led to things like positive discrimination. It's led to things like the push for free education, right? Access to education for people, no matter their station in life or whatever. It's also led to some negative things, like the idea that poor people are all poor just because they're bad and they don't work hard enough, right? So it's like a double-edged sword. But I think at the end of the day, given that we are pushing for this idea and pushing for this goal, this ideal, we're going to work as a society. We're going to notice the places where things are uneven, where they're imbalanced. So we're going to work hard to make those as balanced as possible. So I think we should be pushing for a meritocracy, even knowing that it's probably like an impossible thing to reach.
Thank you. All right, Brento Box.
Yeah, I think I do think we live in a meritocracy. I don't think we just live in a meritocracy in America. I think people live in a meritocracy. I think like the world, or the universe, to expand it, everything functions, or people, we'll just say people function meritocratically. Now, it doesn't mean that people are always fair, but it means that people value, or whatever people value is what they consider of merit, right? And so I guess the question of meritocracy, people sort of feel like when you ask the question, you're asking, are people treated fairly? Are people rewarded according to their efforts or their merits, right? And we say, to speak to what some of the other people said, like, well, it's based on connections. It's like, well, yeah, but you establish connections based on merit. You don't establish connections in relationships with people who like steal from you or deceive you, or who you can't rely on. So you base your relationships on the perceived merit of other people, their reliability, or the services that you can do for them or they can do for you. So yeah, I think anything that is not based on merit doesn't last very long. So I think societies are inherently based on merit. I think any functional society is inherently a meritocracy.
Okay. All right, Top Dolphin.
Yeah, so I think that we live in, I think I most agree with like Doobie kind of. We live in like a hybrid sort of society. I think there's a lot of evidence that there's a lot of things that are based on merit, and there's a lot of evidence that we live in like a world filled with like nepotism and stuff like that as well. I think it's pretty, I don't know if I'd say it's 50-50, but I'd say it's probably pretty close to that. I think a lot of people think that like they'll say like, oh, like we live in a meritocracy, we don't, and then like a meritocracy is like good. But I think like something that people forget is like if we take people on their merits, right? Like poor people and people at disadvantages are more likely to have less merit than someone who starts off at a higher like plane, right? Like they might put forth similar levels of effort, right? And it might take the poor person like way more effort to get out of that situation, which is like you could say is unfair. But when at the end of the day, if like Jeff Bezos's kid grows up like running nonprofits when he's 14, like he's probably going to have a lot higher qualifications than someone who was like working themselves through high school. And so I don't think like a meritocracy is always like the perfect system, right? I would say that like we should like try to find a way to balance these things in a way in which we think it's fair. So like definitely like bringing up people who are at disadvantages so they can like compete on level playing fields, but not also forget that sometimes like personal connections can be very valuable and take advantage of this.
Open to the panel.
So a meritocracy is probably the closest thing to an ideal system that you can get, because you've got people who are prepared to fulfill the roles they have in society. Like that's my general thought here. I want to strongly push back on the idea that a society can't function unless it's a meritocracy, because that's absolutely 100% not true. I will say that a society is more likely to collapse the further they stray from this concept of putting the right people in the right slots. Like if you look at Tsarist Russia, for example, all the top slots in that country were filled with people who were willing to tolerate Rasputin, right? And then that, didn't work out so well. But with that in mind, I mean, it still took 20 years and it almost didn't actually happen anyway, right? Like,
Sure. Well, so I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I guess that's kind of my point. It's like, I mean, you could say like, well, yeah, but it falls down over time. Yeah, it falls down over time, right? The once a society starts straying from meritocracy, once it starts rewarding or relying on what has no merit, then it's only a matter of time. Now it's in decline. Like civilizations, they have momentum. They keep going, right? But
Right.
they don't immediately stop.
But like a civilization doesn't necessarily even have to be birthed through merit necessarily. Like they might be the top, like the folks who are in charge might be like, the top individuals for a period of time, like maybe the best warriors, but just because they're the best warriors doesn't mean that they're the best administrators, right? So like the role that they play changes. So like arguably you would say that the civilizations that function the best would have the best warriors that could transition to administration. And whether you can consider that like a measure of merit is,
Yeah, I think it would fall under merit again, right?
Well, yeah,
I-
so that's why I want to let's flatten that out too, because earlier you were saying that the universe just functions based on merit, like this just is how it is.
People.
But then
I said the universe. I should
Oh,
have
okay.
specified two people. People do. Yeah.
Okay, if people
Relationships do.
if okay, you're just were you applying that like generally because you were kind of speaking?
Yeah,
for-
I'm applying it to. I guess the question was, do we live in a meritocracy? And I think that kind of means specifically the U.S. But when I think the question is asked very broadly, and it's do people like function on merit? I think meritocracies. I would say my answer to yes, in the U.S. we do, and then my answer is more generally that people function on meritocracy, and anything that doesn't is generally dysfunctional.
I don't think that's necessarily true because like a really good example is like if you have like a burger flipper at a McDonald's, right? It's very easy for someone to put someone into like the burger flipper position who can get the job done adequately, right? That doesn't mean they are the best person for the job, right? So and they might have like there might have been some other circumstance like maybe they were the best person that showed up at the interview, right? But that doesn't mean they're the best person for the job. Maybe they were maybe there was someone else who showed up to the interview who was better for the job of burger flipper, but the person knew the person who ended up getting the job a little bit better, and they chose that person. And that person still completes the job and does a fine job. But had someone who was better at it, right, gotten the position, the job would be being done better. And you can apply this to like anything. It doesn't have to be a burger flipper. It could be like president of the United States, although that's elected, so that's a little different. But
Sure.
Well, so like the thing is, like, so I guess we are breaking the meta, I guess, and just redefining merit as we see fit based on the circumstance. So
Right.
to argue whether we have a meritocracy or not, we actually need to accept the sort of constantly changing definition of merit and then look to see if that is actually being applied. So like in the United States,
Right.
I would argue that merit is, again, probably a third thing that will decide where you are in life. Like a lot of it is personal connections. Like a ton of it is personal connections. Like you get hired because you happen to know someone. That's going to take priority over like, you know, your credentials. There's lots of, I mean, as someone who's worked in a variety of businesses, I've seen a lot of people who didn't necessarily deserve a job, but knew someone important able to get the job.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, like if we want to use a political example, for example, we could look at like Hunter Biden joining the military, right? Like he was given all the special accolades and treatment in the world because you know he's Joe Biden's son, and then like he was even given like a special Navy role, something that nobody with his background would get, and then he blew it with cocaine like that year, right? So I mean that's just one example, and I'm not saying that his example applies everywhere, but I feel like we have plenty of examples of nepotism and buddying.
Can I add on to that really quickly? So I think you're right. I think that it is like personal connection. It's who happens to be like in your sphere, right? But it's also kind of luck, right? Like what if my mother, not knowing any better, just sat me down in front of some TV show, and that TV show happened to really push on a concept that got me interested in math or something, right? So I got really into math very young. Right. And so later in life, I was able to succeed and be very good at math because she just happened to sit me in front of that TV show. Right. Like there are a lot of, or I mean, this happened in my own life. I happened to meet somebody when I first got into my career who was willing to sit down with me and talk me through how he built his business and kind of give me like a roadmap for how I could do it myself. Right. If I hadn't run into him, I probably would have known a business right now. Right. I probably wouldn't be doing as well as I am right now. But the kind of the reason this topic came up. I guess I should bring back real quick. So I think it has those two things, but I think a hard work ethic and merit is also it's in the mix, right? It's one of the components. But the reason this kind of came up is we were talking about this Texas bill. I guess the state is this bill's been pushed in a bunch of states. In one of the provisions in the bill, and it's a bill about education, was that teachers and school districts can't be required to teach that meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist or were created by members of a particular race to oppress members of another race. And I agree with that. I think that's a silly thing to teach children. Someone else on the panel disagreed and said, we don't live in a meritocracy. It is racist. It is used. That concept is used to dismiss the plight of poor people, right? To say that if you're poor, it's not because you were born in a really shitty situation. It's because you're just not working hard enough. You're lazy. So fuck you, right?
Oh, can you explain the bill one more time, just a little slower? I thought
sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read it verbatim. So the specific thing that kind of brought up this concept was in the bill, one of the provisions is a teacher, administrator, or other employee of a state agency, school district, or open enrollment charter school may not require or make part of course inculcation in the concept that meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist or created by members of a particular race to oppress members of another race. And basically, I guess what they're, and this was like an anti-1619 project bill, right? Because they promote the idea that meritocracy, hard work ethic, these things are pushed onto children, and particularly white children, to teach them that the reason Black people are impoverished or Hispanic people are impoverished in this country is because they're just lazy, because they're just stupid, right? And it's their fault. It's not because they don't have the resources or access to things. It's because they're just, they're just bad, right? And that's true. I think there's some truth to that. But given that's the case, I don't think we should abandon the concept entirely. I don't think we should just say, oh, this is like, because this is used in a bad way sometimes, we should just not teach it. We shouldn't teach that merit is a good thing. We shouldn't strive for meritocracy, and we shouldn't treat it hard work ethic. Is it something to be praised?
So the bill is saying you cannot require to teach that meritocracy is big.
Right.
Okay, but it doesn't say that you can't teach it. It's just saying that you can't require to teach
it just can't be,
that
it can be like a required part of the course curriculum.
Okay.
There's some apparently there's some confusion about that wording, right? Because it says compel, and according to Joe Lewis, that specific language in legalese means basically they don't have to do it at all. So like, I mean, or like, yeah, they basically don't have to do it at all. Exactly what that means. Yeah. Well,
they don't have to teach it.
Yeah, no.
So
well, I mean,
pretty sure
or maybe
how it works is like
can't do it. I don't know, but apparently it maybe not be, the wording might not be as intuitive as it seems. But
I will destroy Joe on that right now.
But I think it means, so I kind of get what, like, I think you said Joe Lewis is coming from. So what it sounds like to me, and I could be wrong because I'm not like a lawyer, but it sounds like they're saying that this cannot be a part of like any official standard. So like you wouldn't be able to test children on this. You wouldn't make it part of curriculum, because anyone who going through that part of the curriculum would be required to like learn that. However, that doesn't mean that a teacher couldn't like talk about it like anecdotally. But it just couldn't. It seems like it's probably preventing it from being a part of the curriculum.
So, are we talking about the bill that was passed in Tennessee specifically?
Texas.
This is the Texas bill. I just posted it in the group chat if you guys want to just, you can just see like Control F for meritocracy. But that specific line is kind of what brought this up. And the conversation isn't really about the bill, right? We don't need to harp on the bill itself. It's about the idea that because this concept is used, I think we'd all agree that it is used to promote pretty negative things sometimes, right? To promote the idea that, again, poor people are poor. And I used to say this growing up because I grew up in a really poor area. I grew up extremely poor. All my family was poor. And I saw them do really dumb shit that I didn't do, right? They got into gangs and drugs and all these things. So I grew up thinking, poor people are poor just because they're poor people, right? Like literally, morally, ethically, whatever you want to call it, they're just bad people, right? And this is why they're poor. It's not because of their circumstances. And I think that is true for some people. I think some people make their own problems, right? But I don't think it's true across the board. I think there are definitely people that are born into situations where it's just fucking impossible to drag themselves out of this, right?
I never agree
that the question is never that it's impossible, but like this kind of goes to what I said earlier, is that this is another argument here, but I would say that we ought not say that just because someone starts in a bad position that they should have to work twice as hard as someone who starts in like a well-off position, right? And so what kind of getting what you're saying, Doobie, and I kind of agree with you, is that the concept of meritocracy, a lot of people like to treat this as it's like a pure unadulterated like the crown standard of like how we should run society. And I don't think that's true, because a lot of times like meritocracy leads to like groups being like unrightfully praised or unrightfully shunned because they don't work hard. Like they're like the idea of poor people. Oh, people who are poor don't work hard enough, and they're lazy, they don't try, they do all these bad things. Or like the idea that rich people are like saints and they do all these great things for society, when necessarily the effort that's being put there is like not the same.
I mean, like I said earlier, I think that meritocracy, that this striving for a meritocracy, right, is an idea. even if it's imperfect, even if we're never going to really get there, has led to a lot of positive things, right? So, for example, affirmative action and like a positive discrimination programs, right? That promote people, that take people's race into account, to promote them to, to make it a little easier for them to get into college or to get access to funding or scholarships, right? All those things I think exist because we're striving toward meritocracy and we're trying to balance out the playing field.
So
Okay.
I don't think that the pushback when it comes to like meritocracy, um, I think like maybe there's like some word issues going on here. So like when I was just doing research and looking at what people were talking about when I came to this was mostly about like how hard people worked and the abilities that people have or the abilities that people possess, and whether or not they're getting what they deserve or getting like what they worked for based on that. And so a lot of this is going to connect with like income inequality, things like that, or whatever. We can get into that, but like we, I agree with like what Top Dolphin was saying. I don't think that anybody thinks that like a poor person should have to work like twice as hard to get the same things that maybe somebody in the upper income levels are getting. But I think that the issue is like the access to those things, and that there is that difficulty in obtaining those abilities and obtaining those skills. And I feel like maybe we're like deviating off of that a little bit with how we're
I
talking
don't.
about
I don't.
meritocracy.
So let me be clear. I don't necessarily think that everyone believes this. I think that's like the reality that we live in. I think that like poor people generally have to work harder and rich people generally don't. They have different sets of challenges, and not to say one is better than the other, but generally, if you want to be successful, what we define as successful as a poor person, you're going to have to put in way more effort. You're going to have to make way less mistakes than someone who is like of a higher class. The same thing goes for like race, like if or like sex, like if you're in like certain groups that are like minority groups or like oppressed groups, generally you're going to have to work harder than someone of the majority group to like reach the same level of success as them. And I would then my argument is that that's unfair and that we should do it. But there are lots of people out there who do believe that that's fair. They say like a lot of people see the world as there are right decisions and wrong decisions, and if you make wrong decisions, you are punished, and if you make right decisions, you aren't. And I wouldn't agree with that framing of the world, but that's a way that a lot, like I would say, half of our country views things.
I would say that's actually that is the way the world works. I'm not saying that people don't face challenges or that challenges are not that they're not unequal challenges faced by different people. But if the world doesn't work in a way where right decisions lead to good outcomes and bad decisions lead to bad outcomes, like there's no priority for making any decisions at all. Like you can't make a choice. You can't make a decision.
Well,
you
if
can't
it was
improve
like
anything.
a perfect system where like you could punish the wrong decisions and reward the right decisions, you'd be accurate. But the fact of the matter is that is not the circumstance. Everybody makes mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are acknowledged, and there's a problem for that, or there's a step backwards that results from it. But a lot of the time, if you have privilege, you may get to make those mistakes and then nothing happens. So I think it really depends on.
It's not that nothing happens. No,
like,
not nothing.
I wouldn't say nothing happens, but like I think the difference is that the outcomes from the punishments that we give don't affect the different groups equally. So
I grew up in I'm just saying, like I grew up in a pretty happy, socioeconomic area, and a lot of my police interactions as a teenager were not that bad, and I was doing things that were not necessarily authorized. I guess I don't know, and like they didn't acknowledge it. It's just like, okay, kids, go. I don't want to see you here again.
I guess you can talk about like that. I would say these are kind of two different issues. But
Can I give an example?
Yeah, there is the idea that like if you're in a bad neighborhood and you're caught doing something like the police will throw you in jail. Whereas if you're in a nice neighborhood, you get a warning. Like
and this applies to work too, right?
There's
like,
also the idea, right? Like for like let's give the example of like speeding tickets. If you give someone who makes $100,000 a year $100 speeding ticket, that person is going to say, okay, I paid the $100, like speeding's fine, whatever. Like that's nothing to me. or that's may not be nothing, but it's very little. Whereas like if you give someone who makes $18,000 a year on $100 speeding ticket, they're like, whoa, this sets me back for like months of my income. And the punishments here are not necessarily the same. The same way as like if you a lot of times I know people who like who have lost their license, and someone who makes a lot of money, they're like, oh, I can Uber, I can do this, I can get people to drive me, whatever. And the poor people are like, no, I have to go to work and drive my car and get and further incur punishments because I can't afford to not do this thing. It's a lot of times like the punishments that people face don't treat the different groups equally, and so so that's why I would say we ought not have like similar punishments for people, and we ought help disadvantaged groups in situations like that.
Let's go to.
I'm sorry to have to step away so soon.
Sure.
I just have to step away maybe for 5 minutes or so.
All right,
sorry,
take your
guys.
time. Take your time,
Okay.
buddy.
Can I give kind of like, because I don't want to be like what do you call it, anecdote Andy? I don't know who the fuck Andy is, but I have an anecdote, right? Actually, that's the exact example as new speeding tickets. So when I was poor, I got a speeding ticket. It also turned out that I hadn't paid my fucking registration at the time because I was broke as fuck, right? I was not making steady money at all. They impounded my car. That meant that I couldn't go to work, right? They were charging like $75 a day at the impound yard. In addition to the speeding ticket, that was like $400, right? And the base, I actually had to call I called the sheriff, right? The sheriff's office, and I literally begged them to let my car out because they were going to hold it for 30 days, right? $75 a day. I got him to let it out like 3 days later, and it cost like $1,300. I had to take loans all over the fucking place, right? It was a really bad situation that could have like destroyed my entire life, right? Because I was broke as fucking. I didn't have the luxury of making those kind of mistakes. And so going forward, I stopped making those mistakes, right? But if that same situation happened to me today, I'd just pay it, whatever, like not a big deal, right? $1,500, $2,000, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? So it is true that like if you're poor, you don't get to fuck up as much. But given that that is the reality, and I think most people in these situations, I mean, I knew that that was reality. I was just being irresponsible, really. And taking risks and speeding when I shouldn't have been speeding because I knew I didn't have registration on the car. I was stupid. Okay, leave me alone.
No, I mean, no, it's fine. I can relate to you.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Like I have an anecdote that's like almost the same, actually.
And so at some level, I should have known really that I couldn't be doing that. That I was acting out above my pay level, basically. Right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, yeah, like I believe that that's like the reality is like, yeah, you should know. But like when we like go to model societies and stuff, when you say like, I think we should say that like, I think it's a good thing that we ought not punish like take two people and punish them differently based on how much money they make, right? Or not like or not necessarily that, but or like have. Like we shouldn't take two people who make the same mistake and punish the person who makes less money way more, right?
I mean, we could actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was gonna say like we could actually.
Say, like, we effectively do this, and that like
right.
we punish the person who makes less money way more because it's a way larger percentage of their income, and it's way likely to have spiraling and like unintended effects on their life. Whereas like someone who's really rich, it has more of what's probably the intended effect. It's like you speed, you pay some money, and it tries to get you not to speed again. And I guess if you want to go way on the high side, it's like, well, then eventually like Jeff Bezos is out there just like, I'm speeding every day because like fuck, like I just got money, I just toss that out there, right? But and like that's like an error on the side of the system too. Like on the
at
end,
a certain
it's
point,
not fair.
At a certain point, you can only break the law so much, and you'll be taking your wealth to prison with you, right?
Yeah, that's true. So
that being said, there's the case of Ethan Couch, who's the affluenza teen who murdered people with his car, and then proceeded to use his social connections to not have to go to jail, and then continue his like partying lifestyle.
Yeah, that was insane. The affluenza thing. Yeah.
So like
Brock
we
Turner.
literally. Like, so you could argue that the United States is a meritocracy, and then we like equate merit with money, and then that is how this is working, right? Like, which is not great.
Right, but that's like not really what the I think where the conversation, or I think that's where our conversation's a little different than like widely what people are talking about when they talk about these things. Like when people are talking about meritocracy, they don't think that somebody who is born into a wealthy family and who inherits a bunch of money, and then has a good life and has that good life based on merit. Most people won't consider who you were born to as merit.
But Clavkis, right? So I think you're correct on that point, that very narrow point, that people don't like. If you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, they're like, oh yeah, you may not have gotten there by merit. But one, that's if you even know their background, right? And two, like success looks like success for people. So
I also want to disagree. I actually want to disagree here.
let me finish your point, and then yeah. But like success looks like success. So we see it all the time in terms of like entrances into elite universities, right? There are rich individuals who get their kids into those universities, and they can do that in all kinds of ways, right? But one way or the other, like the fact is, you have that degree, a mark of success, and people will like look at you. Oh, look at this person. This person went to Yale. This person went to Harvard, right? I'm going to afford them a level of respect for that success, and they must have deserved it, right? When it was a matter of wealth, and then from there, those connections breed other connections, right? And they can get into elite positions that others of us can't, right? And in the end, right, they end up at fancy, cushy jobs, born of those connections. And people say, well, didn't that person deserve it? And then from that person's perspective, well, they worked hard. I mean, they actually went to that school and they did the tests. I'm assuming that the teachers didn't go easy on them, but whatever, right? But they did the tests, and then they applied for the job, and they're doing the job. So that from their perspective, yeah, I did it all. Yeah, it's me.
I'm
I worked
so
for this.
glad that you brought up the university thing, because this is going to be great. I'm really excited about this now, actually. So I wanted to push back on Clav's point just a little bit, and then we're going to actually talk about this normal university education that they're going to have, right? So I think that us plebs are not going to look at someone's heritage and say, oh, well, you're not from the right family, et cetera, et cetera. But I think anybody who has, not everybody who has the wealth, but a lot of people who have the wealth are looking for the pedigree of the folks they're interacting with. So like there's the old, I don't want to say nobles because they're not nobles, but like the old rich are resenting the new rich because they weren't, born with the wealth. They've moved up in society and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's something to be said for our financial backgrounds actually impacting your ability to connect with folks, although maybe it's less so now than before. As far as rich folks going to college and not deserving it, so I know someone who was an academic ghostwriter, and what he would do is he would write essays for people who paid him to do it. And he was so successful at doing this that he was actually able to hire professors at a variety of colleges to write papers for college students going to different universities. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. I saw his clients list, and there were all these really well-off people that would be like scandalous to actually reveal the identities of. It was ridiculous. And he was making bank, so much bank that he's currently living in like Acapulco or something and like living it up. Like, this is an actual thing. So like, no, I don't believe that these people actually went to college, and the only thing they had to do is pass the test. But all the well-written essays are probably being written by a college professor, unless they have like some
I want to push back. So like,
That's
are
a
right.
gross
That is
generalization.
true, and that does happen, right? That is not. I don't know. I don't think that's the norm among like wealthy people.
I'm in the
is that-
fucking wrong
now,
business.
There are
Oh my
lots of
God.
people who do probably take advantage of stuff like that, but like I wouldn't. I would say that like, hey, like that's probably outside the rules, and like maybe we ought to put more resources into finding people who do stuff like that and punishing them. I know algorithms have gotten really good at like finding things that are like plagiarized.
Anytime these no,
no.
it happens a lot. This guy's making way too much money for this not to be happening frequently. He has like a whole business model built off of this. And on top of that, hold on.
Wait. Because for every one person who like this guy can make $1 trillion, and for every one person who uses this service, there's 5 or 10 that don't. Right? You don't have to like be the majority. There doesn't have to be a majority of people doing this for there to be a market for it, right? Those are two like unequivalent things.
Well, I mean, it's true. It just like it depends on what percentage of the people going to this university are wealthy enough to be able to afford the service. And if you put that, I mean, we could like look into the statistics. I could,
but like that's like it's such a bad way to look at it, because like then you're just assuming that everyone who's wealthy is just getting free rides, and there are plenty of wealthy people out there who put the work in, who write their own essays, who get smart, but the argument I would make is that they were put in those positions to do better anyways, right? And that happens all the time. Yes, there are people who cheat the system, and yes, we should say fuck you to the people who cheat.
I mean,
honestly,
you're not for rich people to cheat the system than poor people.
I mean, it's anecdotal, and I agree that it's anecdotal.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more effective and a lot more like a lot better of a conversation to have if we talk less about like the ways that like rich people can corrupt the system necessarily, and instead talk about like the natural like ebbs and flows of how this works. So for example, like Clavicus was kind of pointing at this, but the idea that being rich isn't merit in and of itself, but it makes it much easier to achieve merit by being rich, which is like a very true statement.
Well, yeah, and I just want to point out really quickly that you not exposing this person and all these rich people that are taking advantage of this defrauding of the system is actually a moral failure on your end. It's a lack of merit on your end.
Actually, I'm going to say I will say one thing.
Him being willing to share this with somebody that he had like built up a relationship with enough to be safe, to feel safe, to be safe in sharing this information with you that could destroy his life, destroy the lives of who knows how many people.
I think
it's actually a demonstration of merit on his.
So there's actually 2 things going on there that I'm going to add to this. The first, I agree with you, and he agrees with you. He actually felt horrible about the whole thing and has been wanting to expose these people for years. I haven't talked to him in like a bit. I'm going to see what we can do with that. Second thing, though,
bullshit.
No, wait. All right, fine. Dare me to find him. I'll see what happens. But whatever. The second thing I wanted to say. What was the thing I was gonna say? It was what happens when they're caught. So this is why he was getting pretty resentful. Actually, when these people were caught with these fake essays, nothing. Like literally no punishments whatsoever. They would literally get to continue the degree as if nothing happened and get a slap on the wrist. Like he would just give it, like they would give him advice, and like deans of various universities were just letting it go. I'm gonna see if I can find him and bring this more to light. But like generally speaking, that was what I got out of the whole thing.
I wanna make it very clear in that like when you say nothing, that's a little bit dismissive. Now, effectively, you might be right. But like to the person in the situation who didn't write their essay.
Oh, they were freaked out for sure.
Gets caught with a fake essay. The punishment they got was that essay wasn't counted, right? And that they had to rewrite the essay, right?
Maybe. Do we know that?
I'm assuming you're saying that you're not saying that the people who were caught, they were accepting the fraudulent essays. Right?
So like all this stuff. So I don't have a record of everything that happened. But generally speaking, the what I got from Homeboy was that they did not act on the information.
Yeah.
They just let it go.
No negative.
Like the people who are involved were freaking out. They would like send them frantic texts like all the time.
Yeah.
But
from my understand, right, and like maybe, and this can be wrong, is a lot of times what professors will do is if you get the right professor, and maybe these professors are more common at really nice schools with really nice people, is that a professor, like if you are caught like what they consider like plagiarizing or like submitting fraudulent essays, that's like expulsion from school level of like shit. And a lot of times what professors will do is they'll say, hey, this student made a dumb decision. I'm not going to accept said essay, of course, but I'm not going to necessarily report them to like school officials because I don't want to ruin their life.
There were deans that were letting this go.
Yeah, but also you said that these essays were being written by professors at other universities or that university. That is like a massive, that is a huge scandal, right? That is like a national level scandal, right? So yeah, maybe if these individual students got caught, there wasn't that much hubbub about it. But if you'd exposed that, or you'd exposed that, given you had access to the information, that would have definitely caused changes in the system.
Well, I'd have to have proof, right? Which means homeboy would have to be on board,
If you
right?
feel so bad about it,
And also, it depends on whether or not those professors are being deceived. If we want to talk about this, like, I don't think we should talk, but like, said professors could be being coerced into writing essays that they don't know are going to students as well.
All right, I'll send them an email right now, and
I mean,
I'll see
maybe,
what we
but-
can do.
I'm not saying that's what happened, but
stretch.
that is like a plausible, like,
That's-
and that is something that does happen.
It's a bit of a stretch,
Right.
but
I want to respond to what.
okay, Clav, go. I do want to. There's a few things I want to respond to that haven't got a chance. But got Clav first.
Yeah, so in regard to like the perception of this, surveys are showing that like a large portion of Americans buy into the meritocracy idea. And then the thing that I was trying to bring up is that it's worth critiquing this, or at least analyzing it, to see if people, their faith, I guess, is actually well founded, and whether or not our system really is based on people's merit, or how much of that actually is based on merit. We can analyze a lot of, and that's why I think the more interesting conversation is analyzing, a lot of different areas where people find success through, or like how they find success, even if people mistakenly just assume that just because somebody is successful, that they worked really hard to do it. I think that's like where people are trying to like kind of pull back that curtain and reveal a little bit more about what's really going on behind the scenes.
Okay. So I think this is a few interesting things have been said. I wanted to wait till Brento got back.
Thank you. Sorry.
You said previously, talking about like how good decisions should be punished, right? Or sorry, good decisions should be rewarded, bad decisions should be punished within a meritocracy, right? Or just in society in general, really. But like,
it's almost sure. I would go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So I'd say that one, life isn't so black and white, right? There are so many areas where, like, what is the right decision? Foreign policy, I think, is a good example. Like, foreign policy on what is the correct decision is so often based on your ideology, right? What you maybe think is correct in an action that the U.S. should take, I think is the exact wrong decision and going to be a disaster. But even then, even if you attach metrics, right, quote unquote objective metrics, which may not be so objective, but if you attach metrics to it, you can still see that people failing those metrics still advance despite that, right? So if your argument is that we live in a meritocracy, like, I submit the Iraq War to you, I submit the individuals in the media and the military and the government who said that we would be greeted as liberators by the Iraqi people, right? What's his face? David, God, what's the fuck guy's name? But he's a writer, and someone in chat might know what I'm talking about. But he's a writer. I think he wrote at the New York Times or something. But this guy is extremely conservative. And he had said that. He like, oh yeah, we'll be greeted as liberators, right? Completely fucking wrong. Continue to fail up. And he's like on MSNBC. He's like a conservative too, right? He's on MSNBC, and MSNBC is treating him like this guy's a serious person that we all should be like listening to, right? This happens all the time. There were other people involved in the Iraq War and the planning and decision making, especially immediately aftermath.
Sure.
And they got it all wrong. Yet all of them are like tenured professors, or they're like part of think tanks or something, right? They're all making big money. There's never any consequences for them, even though like we can tell like from basic metrics that everything they said was wrong, and it was a disaster. So
right, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you can be right about all of that, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, not at all. I guess the only question I would have to look to is like, well, and see, I don't know, so I have to ask these questions now. It's like, what is their other body of work? Have they established an entire reputable, worthwhile, merit, body of work that has merit throughout their whole career, and they were just wrong about this? Likely not. Likely they've made many mistakes. But to say like, well, they're failing up. Well, you don't know. Maybe they've done 100 things, and they did the giant mistake in the Iraq War, which is. But are they now pariah? Are they cast down? Are they at the bottom again? Like what's, and so it's more complex than someone was wrong once or even wrong disastrously. You'd have to literally have like full information to make any kind of judgment like that.
Yeah, and it depends on what their goal was in doing it too. Like if they're just trying to sell the idea to us, I mean, I think they did a pretty good job of selling the idea to the American people. To getting a lot of support going in initially. If that was the goal, then they succeeded.
Well, sure, I guess if you, I mean, if
that's what
you're
they were
saying
measuring
that the
by.
goal is to grift, right? Like, and there's a grifter and they've grifted you. Okay, great. But if we're talking about people who are still being taken seriously within that field after the grift, well, then maybe they did fail because the things they predicted was completely wrong, right? Like everything that they said that would happen didn't happen. So I guess I would say that's a failure nonetheless. But good grifters, sure. I mean, right?
Right, that's true. But I mean, also journalism or policy proposals or advocacy it's certainly not like a divination. And I can't they're supposed to predict the future and give kind of like analysis, but they're not good at it. They're not 100%. No one actually is, right? I suppose the people that are should be doing it professionally, and maybe that's your whole point, is that these people do it professionally and they were 100% wrong. But you don't really know. Like, I mean, was that their only thing? Is the question, right? Maybe they've been right in the past. Maybe they've been right since then. I don't know. I would literally have to look into each individual person, and then even then we would have a disagreement possibly about their other,
because of ideology. Exactly that. Because if you, and I'm sorry, I can't remember this person's name, it's tip of my tongue, it's like David something, but like this dude still being fucking taken seriously. But if you looked at him, he's a very conservative writer. And you might agree with the things he has to say.
It's not right? Krugman, is it?
Not Krugman.
Krugman is a famous one.
Not Krugman.
He has a famous quote where he used to the internet will have no greater impact on the economy than less than the fax machine or something like. And he still writes for New York Times. He's still credited.
Yeah. It's not him. It's another guy. And it's fucking killing me. I'm gonna have to fucking look it up. But the point is that you might think differently. So even then, to hold people accountable, right? So like even if you're saying that a meritocracy does exist, how do we even hold people accountable if you and I can agree on what counts as failing, right? If Clav and I can't agree at what counts as failing, then I mean that in itself is a problem, right?
Well, I mean, you can hold them accountable personally by saying, I don't trust this person. And every single person can look into these types of things, and we can all make our own individual accounts of who we want to trust. And then you can extend that to whoever they're writing for, whatever newspaper or publication, right? I mean, like to say that I or you or anyone essentially who doesn't work for the New York Times should have any, ability to hold their journalists or their writers accountable outside of reading their publication is like appealing to like a type of control that we don't have, and I don't think we should have, because how would it be decided, you can only choose to consume or
So I mean, this means that we don't live in a meritocracy then, right? Like we just
it does. It just means that you have limits on your abilities.
Now you're gonna have me flipping my side here.
So when you're talking about like journalism, or assuming that people journalism, you can be right, you can be wrong 100% of the time and be an amazing journalist, right? Which sounds dumb, but as long as the methods that you made were, and the idea is that you probably wouldn't be wrong if your methods were solid, but as long as you there's processes you go, and then you go towards being making predictions, as long as your predictions are founded, even if that's not what happened, that doesn't mean you're a bad journalist. Now you could have done some bad things and made some bad predictions, or had bad methodology into the things that you did, or looked into things in bad ways. But the outcome of a journalist's statements, if I go to predict something and then those things were wrongfully predicted, that doesn't necessarily ruin my credibility.
Wait, are journalists supposed to be predicting things or reporting on what happens? That sounds like
some of them write opinion pieces and stuff.
So that's
it's not always about facts.
Sometimes it's both. Yeah, you report on what happens, and sometimes you speculate.
I imagine if you're a journalist, I imagine if you're a journalist, your job is probably, especially in today's age online, it's probably to generate clicks, right? And even being on let's say in Twitch, right? I don't have to be right about anything. A Twitch streamer doesn't have to be right about anything, but they can still succeed.
So journalists are supposed to report on what happened, and then there's these
Well,
other
no,
folks who
what-
try to get the clicks,
Journalists
right?
are
That's what
supposed
we'd
to-
like to say, but we're talking about like measurements of success, right? So somebody can still land a job somewhere because people are still interested in what that person has to say, and that could be based on like entertainment value amongst other factors. You know, we could go into like a million different variables that are going to be a part of that. It doesn't have to be how accurate they are. Like, and we don't measure accuracy of like journalists or anything like that. If it was that
I
important,
mean,
we should
it's-
have like something that,
We
you know,
do,
that's
measures
just
but
too
that.
we
subjective.
measure accuracy of like present facts, not necessarily future like predictions.
I guess. Go ahead. I was just say the you know to
Oh yeah, for a
ask whether or not-
publication, sure.
Yeah, to ask whether or not we live in a meritocracy based on like the accuracy of journalists is like it's a very subjective you know type of
Right.
industry or specifically to reference. And I mean that's not wrong. You have to apply it to everything. But in this specific case, it's like, well, this journalist or these people said this, and were they right and were they wrong? And it's like, well, there's other factors too, right? I mean, you could look at people who are in you know the health industry or weight loss or anything like physical, you know, physical types of things have very, very measurable results. And you could say like good doctors who lose the fewest patients get, you know, paid more or have the best ratings or something like that, and being very
Well, that doesn't even
that's
mean-
not even true, right? Because like an oncologist, right, is gonna lose way less patients than like a general family practice doctor, right?
Yeah, but
So,
you'd
like-
have to analyze
Well,
it.
it'd be
like-
analysis in the
But
field.
like, no, I think this is a really good example because like, when we go into things and like you make the assumption that like a good journalist ought be correct on the things that they report, right? That's like one way to look at it, but there's a lot of different ways to assign merit. And at the end of the day, it's the person's boss who does that. So like, and doctors,
Yes.
like someone might say, I want the doctor with the highest rate of of like saving lives, right? But like obviously, if you're going to a specialist, right, you'd only want to compare specialists to other specialists. Or if you have some specialized terminal disease, maybe the doctor that's best for you is the doctor that makes you feel most comfortable while dying, right?
Well, right, but that
Sure.
even past that, that's not actually necessarily accurate as well. We were talking about organ donation, and Prime brought up a point like a while back where like there's organs that are just thrown away because they might not be viable, and hospitals will actually reduce their or they're considered not viable like prematurely, I guess was the thing. So like hospitals will reject organs specifically because they want to have a low risk or a low fail rate of transplant because they get more money that way. And I feel like there's a lot of
Mhm.
medical practices that connect to that specifically. So I would say that like every field probably has like some sort of financial angle that impacts how much merit is involved, and not just a financial aspect, but also a communal aspect in terms of like what kind of connections you have and how you got the job that you got. I mean, I'm not saying that everything is without merit in America. I think there are definitely cases where merit will get you further. In fact, I would say that merit will build on your financial and your personal connections and take you further, right? But if you don't have those personal connections, if you don't have the finances, you're not going to have an easy time getting started here. And I don't think
I
that's
think-
a meritocracy.
Just for because I got the name and it's been killing me. David Brooks was the guy I was thinking of. The columns, David Brooks. And for this from his Wikipedia article, before the 2003 invasion of Iraq, Brooks argued forcefully for American military intervention, echoing the belief of commentators and political figures that American and British forces would be welcomed as liberators. All right, sorry, I just had to get that out. Sorry.
Yeah.
Doobie?
So I think the way that we're talking about merit right now is kind of it's a little shallow, right? So we're talking about merit within like a certain field, right? Whether it's like doctor, whatever, right? But it's true that or journalism, right? So it's true that like the best journalist is not always going to get the best like the highest position in like some like news organization. It might just be that the guy who's not as good at journalism, right, not as good as at investigating or whatever, is really good at communicating with people and talking himself up and getting into those positions, right? So he's has some kind of merit in some other area, right, that is allowing him to take advantage of those connections where the best journalists wouldn't be able to, right? I mean, I'm sure we've met a lot of people who are I mean, I'm in sales, right? Like that's my field. And I met a lot of really shitty, really shitty insurance agents and insurance brokers who don't know what the fuck they're doing, but they're really good at talking to people, right? And because they're really good at talking to people, they're really good at getting sales, even if they're actually bad at their fucking job, right? So they make money, they build themselves up, even if they're shit, right? And I think that can be applied to like every field, right?
Yeah.
So taking advantage of those connections and being aware of like what your resources are and using them effectively, I think is something else that we could apply some bit of merit to.
I mean, you have to consider that, any job has multiple like facets to it, right? Like years ago I was managing a farmer's market, and there would be people who, when they would show up, they would do great sales, but they wouldn't show up every day. And some people wouldn't do great sales, but they would show up every day. And like people who showed up every day meant I could do my job reliably. So I valued them greatly, right? Like, I mean, they didn't do the same numbers, but they were so reliable. And like showing up, you could say, is like a facet of merit. And some people couldn't do that, but they could sell well. And it's like, it's such a complex, and like the concept of merit as it applies to all facets of the job is so complex when you say like, well, this person, they're a smooth talker, so they got in, but they're not the best at this. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's lots of different things that you have to do. I guess someone said, I'd just say, someone said, like, maybe you're not the best burger flipper, but you showed up that day. Okay, well then you showed up.
Yeah,
so
and
you're good
and
at
I think
that. The other guy isn't.
Yeah,
I think that, and I think that when
just
just really
like a sales job, right?
Did we finish your point?
Yeah, just really quickly. So I think when meritocracy or like merit are used to like bludgeon people, right, is like a negative thing. When it's used to that poor people are poor because they're just like lazy. It's used in that way, right? It's not, they're not saying, oh, you're poor because you're bad at whatever. It's you're poor because you're a bad person, right? You're lazy, you're whatever, you're stupid, right? So it's used more that all encompassing way, right? Then.
No, I agree with you, Doobie. In fact, it was my other point that I didn't get a chance to say, because you said something to Madela, and I think it was maybe a joke, but I thought it got at this. You said you equated merit to being moral, right? It's like because you didn't do a moral thing, right? You have less merit, and and it plays to your point in that we look at people who have quote unquote made it, right, as being better, as being good, right, and equating that with that success with being right. So like we've seen this many times, like billionaires, right? How many times have you seen a fucking interview with a fucking billionaire on something that's outside of like whatever they made their billions on, right? Like, does that person necessarily know any more about this other field than anyone else does? Bill fucking Gates, I don't know. Do they? Right? But they're treated as serious thinkers on this, right? Oh, we have to listen to this person, right? Rather than other people who've spent their whole lives in that field studying, but they're not fucking rich, right? So they don't get the TV slots, right? They don't get the respect. They don't get the awards thrown at them that these billionaires do. But having that money, right, having that success means you are right. You must know something, right? And something about anything you decide to fucking open your mouth about, right? And that you are good. So yeah,
So this is what I'm talking about earlier when I'm
done a little bit there, right? Because like when you say like, oh well, Jeff Bezos, let's say he's a billionaire, right? And he gets to talk about, or Elon Musk is really famous for this, talking about things he doesn't know shit about. And they go on Twitter or they go on a news show and they get us on a news show because of billionaire. Like we determine that like we're like people want to see them because they're right on the subject. But no, the news organization or the people who listen to them on Twitter don't care whether or not they're right or an expert in this field. They care about whether or not this person is because they want to know what that person has to say, right? Regardless of whether or not they're an expert or whether or not they're right. A lot of times, like you can make the assumption that we see like billionaires or like successful people as like good, and I think to some level you're right. Like I don't want to say like we don't make this like acquaintance, but like a lot of times like the examples people give are where like it's like, oh, why is Jeff Bezos talking about like cars, or why is Elon Musk talking about like finance, right? It's like Well, they're not talking about cars or finance because they're experts on it, but they're notable people who people want to listen to. Is that like the same thing with Twitch? They're like in the Twitch politics community, the most popular people aren't necessarily the smartest, best people. They're the people that people want to listen to, and that's like how the entertainment industry works.
But I would okay. I hear you. I hear you on that one, and you're not. Yeah. You're not like wrong, I think.
Yeah. Like it's not like they're publishing papers in these fields necessarily, right?
No. Back it up. Bill Gates. Let's go back to him again, right? Bill Gates and his education policy, right? Like people are like, oh, let's listen to Bill Gates. Why are people listening to Bill Gates? Because Bill Gates is pouring tons of money through his foundation to like redesign education, like with his public-private partnerships, with his what were those schools? Guys, you know what they're talking about, the schools that
charter,
charter schools, yeah, that type of stuff, right? He was like, oh, I can fix it with education, right? I know how to do it. Except that when after like putting a decade of work into this, they got a report from their own that was funded by themselves, by the Rand organization, done by the Rand organization, that says their work was a complete failure, right? They just poured a ton of money, and because they poured a ton of money, people did what they wanted, right? Because they just chasing those grant dollars, and at the same time, the media and society in general, but the media is telling people this guy is someone to be taken seriously. Well, he's on TV all the time talking about this, right? And then the commentators nodding wisely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you, Bill Gates, for your time. And let's not even have opposing views there, right? So I think that you're correct that people want to listen to a certain few, but like society reinforces that by like literally not questioning it ever, right? If they,
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Clavicus,
go ahead.
Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about before, where it's really important that we pull back the curtain on a lot of this stuff, because part of the larger question here was like the effect that this has on society. So yes, people do want to hear these people. Why do they want to hear these people? It's because of what Prime said, because we equate these people being financially successful with being right. And so then people want to hear this person, and they assume that whatever ideas they have are right. And what does this do to affect society? Well, like for instance, you might elect somebody as president of the United States simply because they're a billionaire and they had a really good reality TV show and they're really entertaining to listen to, blah 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 blah. And the success that this person has is largely cited as one of the qualifications the person has to do this other thing that had nothing to do with what they had done previously. This is really important, and so we need to understand how these people are being successful, what qualifications they have, the merit that they have, and then we can like make better decisions on what positions we're going to put them in. So for instance, the guy who you just said his name, Dave Brooks, this guy, if he's wrong about 500 things or he's wrong about really important things, maybe we ought not listen to what he has to say. And the only way we're going to get people to understand and be more critical of these things is they start to understand that just because people are wealthy doesn't mean that they have what we would normally consider merit, which would be like hard work or like qualifications for X, Y, and Z. Just because they're rich doesn't mean that they have those types of qualifications.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said. Like, just because someone's successful in a field doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about in anything else. Like that makes no sense. But I mean, people look up to success, or they look up to people, or who've done something successfully and reliably, consistently, right? And so no, Elon Musk doesn't always know what he's talking about, in a lot of different areas. But I don't know, people, they want some kind of input from someone, right? They're looking for someone to trust on something. And I don't know, if they're a well-known figure, you can just look and say, well, Elon Musk doesn't know what he's talking about. But he's still a guy who has some kind of insight in multiple I don't know. He has success. He created PayPal. He's doing
in multiple
Tesla
fields.
Now. Multiple fields. Thank you. Yes, that's it. Yeah,
Elon Musk.
And it's like, okay, so he can say what?
I said Elon Musk created PayPal. I mean,
yeah. He created PayPal.
I thought it was Peter Thiel.
Oh.
Who?
Peter Thiel.
No, it was Elon Musk. It was PayPal.
Yeah, he made PayPal.
Okay.
And he's
Peter
doing
Thiel
Tesla
what was Peter Thiel?
Peter Thiel
was he like a
he did like
Peter Thiel, at
like,
least invest in
Yelp
PayPal.
or
I'll
something
look
like
it
that?
up. Don't. Sorry.
I'm
to
Yeah.
pretty sure Elon Musk did not create PayPal.
Yeah.
No,
but
he didn't.
might-
What
but
do you do?
could
Buy
have
it and
been
then make it
like
better
a
or
very,
something?
like early investor or something. I don't know.
I'm
Maybe
pretty sure
so. I think
he-
he created it
I think
though.
he was like the PayPal
Founder or something like that.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure he was. Yeah.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
did that.
Prime, you're right. So it was
it looks like he wasn't the founder of PayPal, but he was founder of a company that later became PayPal.
Okay, well then that just is
yeah, but
even
and
more
Peter,
so.
Peter
then, I
Thiel was
think.
also a founder of PayPal. So
Okay,
yeah, they work together. Yeah.
Lots of
So
billionaires.
I guess it's just essentially it's it's celebrity, but people will look to someone who has proven success in multiple fields and is currently successful for some kind of information or reliability on something, but it doesn't make them an expert and doesn't give them like ultimate authority, of course. Right. But
Yeah,
you,
but that
you
doesn't
recognize
just
that.
happen to billionaires, though. That happens with like celebrities and entertainers.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
The recent thing with Ice Cube and his whole like, what was it, like the
contract.
black
Yeah.
the contract for Black America or some shit.
Yeah.
He's a fucking rapper. Like, what does he know about any of this stuff? Right. So I think you can make those criticisms on both sides. That people just look at people with influence, and people that they see as like successes, and they assume that because you're a success in one area, you must know more than the average Joe about every other area.
So I do want to put some nuance into this slightly because, like Bill Gates can study, right? I don't think he's a dumb guy, and he can learn about education, the education system, and then come to some really interesting conclusions, right? That's the thing, right? People can do more than one thing, right, outside of their career, right? The thing I'm questioning is not the fact that they can do more than one thing, right? They're human beings with complex minds. No, what I'm questioning is how they are treated within our society, right? And that the merit that they get from one other area, right, directly translates to another area, and this is done via their money, right?
Well, not just their money. I would say it could be almost like a personal connection. Like we as a population personally connect with a celebrity or B celebrity, and thus we trust their judgment for things. I mean, this actually falls directly into that fallacy, I would say.
Kind of like parasocial relationships with celebrities, basically.
Yeah. I mean,
we imagine our relationship with them. Like they don't know who we are.
But yeah, I would say I don't think so. Maybe I don't know. I might agree with Prime on this. But my first thought, my instinctual thought is that we ought not say that because a lot of people go to this person for something that it means we see them as an expert. Maybe your average person does, but I don't know if your average person's opinion is necessarily important in this. So when it comes the education thing, right?
Well, it's the average
really
one.
Good example, right? Everyone, a bunch of random people could say, "Oh, Bill Gates obviously knows what he's talking about." But the people who are really important to look at are the people who are investing their money in this, right? And the people who invest in their money might not have invested because they thought Bill Gates knew fuck all about it, but they might have thought that he was a good person to fund this project. Because he has a lot of money and he has the connections with people who do know, right? That's a possible thing.
Or to Brento's point previously, that or my point previously, someone's point previously, that actually judging these things as success is different, right? So Dolphin, you were saying that they're investing this money with him because they think he's the right person to invest with, right? Well, by right person, meaning the person who can give you the most on your return, because these charter schools, right? There are businesses, right? People are investing in these things to get a return out of them, right? Turning education to a commodity, right? And if you think Bill Gates is good for that much, right? Well, then that's what you would. That's what you sign up for, right? Not necessarily that he will succeed at educating these kids. It's a return on your investment. So there's that. What was my other point? I had another really good point. It was brilliant. But I'll think of it again. Sorry.
We'll just give that to you based on your reputation.
Thank you.
Influence, Amazing point, right?
Yeah, what a great point, Brian.
Shit.
So
That's something I was gonna say too.
yeah, so getting back to the meritocracy thing. So given that what we understand as a meritocracy, what we currently have in this country, is not really a meritocracy. I think we all agree. Brento, I think you're on the edge, but it's not. I think most of us would agree it's not a real meritocracy. It's not like
I would push back. I don't think it's not a real meritocracy, but I don't think it's not a pure meritocracy, right?
Yeah, it's like it's an imperfect meritocracy.
It's like a hybrid system. But I would also argue that like that's not necessarily a bad thing. And while it does fail in a lot of places, right? There are also a lot of places in which a pure meritocracy, or the way that we might define a meritocracy, might fail, and like it might succeed better. The system we have might succeed better.
But
so like given
I remember my point. I'm gonna get that done and then Doobie take it. My point was about Bill Gates once again. In terms of vaccines, the other arena he's been in, right? So you said, Adam, that we shouldn't rely necessarily on the average person. If they happen to think Bill Gates is an expert in education, then it is what it is, right? But like they're important stakeholders, and we should be judging by them. Well, the fucking UN backed Bill Gates' vision of how our response to COVID should be, right? And it's been a disaster in terms of like getting these vaccines to third world countries, right? Many of them still don't have a single fucking dose in their countries, and that's because that Bill Gates pushed this idea that we shouldn't give up like the patents, right? Like shouldn't make the patents free, right? So that other people can manufacture. That was his idea. He pushed that, right? Even when other manufacturers were like, no, actually, I will hand over this technology. He actually called them and made them stop. So like, why was Bill Gates listened to? Why did he get to bully his way to becoming literally the vaccine czar, right? Like the vaccine guy within the UN to handle this thing. It's because he has fucking money. That's why his vision was allowed to take hold, right? And literally cost the lives of how many people, how many thousands of people we'll never even know because of Bill Gates' idea, right? He was never a fucking expert. I'm sorry, Doobie.
Okay, I remember. Given that this is a hybrid system, or not a perfect meritocracy, it's an imperfect, whatever you want to call it, and given that idea, the idea of like a meritocracy, and like the hard, work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that sort of thing, is used to like belittle the oppression, to dismiss the oppression of a wide range of people in this country. Do you guys think that there's a good argument for not teaching this, or maybe teaching that it's a bad way of thinking? And if so, like, what are some alternatives?
So generally speaking, I mean, just coming from this, I don't think that we make decisions based on merit, like at the forefront, like whatsoever. So with that in mind, teaching meritocracy as a general lifestyle choice, I think, is unhealthy in multiple ways. Like, yeah, you can inspire someone to work harder, but at the same time, you can also give people mental health issues because, they're trying to do their best and they can't, right? Like, there's a lot of controversy about teaching meritocracy as a whole. I think. That being said, if we're going to talk about meritocracy as a construct, I think we should absolutely talk about it, because we need to understand the nuance that's attached to it. Like, what is merit to begin with, where it actually works, like how it actually is used in this country, and then how it's abused in this country. I think those are very important topics.
I think I wouldn't be supportive of that being taught, because I don't really think that that's like the reality of most people's lives. I mean, I think like in order for people to move up, typically you have to work smarter, not necessarily harder. I don't know if that would still count as meritocracy.
That's merit.
Would you still consider that?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, like,
Because I wouldn't want somebody to be being taught that just working harder is the way to improve your status.
Even working harder or smarter or any of this stuff. Like, I feel like we need to talk about like the nuance of like what hard work is, and not actually suggest that a meritocracy is like what actually is happening in this country when it's not.
I think maybe this is just me. I think like after having this conversation so far, like as far as we've progressed, I think that having the concept of like a meritocracy actually kind of hurts like the end results we might be trying to reach. And like not necessarily that we shouldn't have a discussion like this, but I think like necessarily like teaching, a lot of times when you get into that, you're like, well, like what is the merit? And a lot of the discussions we had were like, necessarily should people be valued or not be valued within a meritocracy framework. We didn't actually like, I don't think I think Prime brought up a few examples, but I don't think we often, when we bring up examples against meritocracy, we're arguing against it. We were just arguing about which merit should be valued. And I think that's actually like the conversation that when we go to teaching kids is something that we should teach more, which actually goes to fixing a lot of the problems. Like when you're talking about like Bill Gates being in charge of the vaccine because of his money, right? One of the things we should teach children is like you should think about why you go to people for information, right? And I think that kind of gets lost if we should just say like, hey, everyone needs to work hard, or hey, everyone needs to have good families or anything like that, right? It's like we need to talk about like we need to instill in children like the hey, these are the types of people that you should trust with information. These are what you should look for when you go to a doctor. This is what you should look for when you're looking for a financial planner. Don't look for the people who like are just the loudest or the most visual, or the people who are necessarily the biggest faces on entertainment media, right?
Mm-hmm. I can't, like, I guess I don't feel like I have moved like from my initial position. I can't see a society functioning where you don't teach people about merit, or that they should seek merit, or that, you know, merit is what they should like define their decisions by, like on anything, even from low to high. Now, like when we talk about larger systems like the government, or, you know, companies, or, you know, worldwide vaccines, like then it becomes so large that sometimes it can get clouded or muddled because there's so many different factors. But on like a personal level, I think you should always teach individuals, and then people who are working together for anything like a company or anything, that like, no, you should always seek to make good decisions, and the good decisions are by definition the ones that bring the outcomes that you want, and therefore they have merit, right? Like the outcomes that you want to achieve.
Yeah, but what
are
I
the ones
guess what
with
I'm
merit.
saying is
hold
like,
on.
that's almost like a given in our society this day, is that like good outcomes should have good. Now this isn't always the case.
Yeah,
I think
Well, I
most
mean, but
people
that's
agree
taught
that,
though.
like good out. Yeah, it is. But I think what happens is we try to spend so much time having that conversation that we forget to have the conversation of what are like good actions, and what are like, I don't know how many times I've talked, like I talk a lot about like what I think is good and like what my fundamental beliefs are. But I don't think like 90% of people in the United States and probably in the world actually have these like thoughts. Or
Well, no, they don't. Like a lot of the
Right?
structure of a society is a lot of the structure in a society is based on this sort of faux ideal of like what you should strive for, and it keeps the society stable because if
I wouldn't
folks
even say that.
are well, no, it is though. Like most
I would say our
societies
society
have
is
their
very
model.
community based, and that
No,
it's like and like when we
no,
make decisions, a lot of the times it's like,
no,
or when we
it's
come,
model.
it's
Okay,
like,
hold on.
no,
Hold
it's
on,
like
hold on.
it's
Let me just get my point out, and then you can interrupt me
okay.
after I get my point out.
That wouldn't be an interruption, but yeah.
I realized that after I said it, so
No,
thanks
you're
for
good,
that
you're good.
interruption. So no, I think that a lot of societies intrinsically rely on this model citizen to be the bedrock of their society. If a lot of people who don't necessarily think about have moral quandaries, are going for an ideal, the society is a lot more stable than if they are striving to find out what that ideal is on their own. So for society to function, I actually agree with Brento Box on this. You do have to have like some sort of foundation for folks to strive for. So I agree with that, generally speaking. That being said, we do need to address what a meritocracy is and how it's abused. So like this concept that folks are being taught can be abused. Things in America aren't as good as they used to be anymore, and this is why. That type of rhetoric is abusive and comes from this kind of faux reality of what merit is. And people need to know that they're being pushed in this direction, but also not to like buy into it too much. Like I think that there's like a little bit of a balancing act that needs to be conducted here.
I don't think I disagree with me as much as I thought, but I think that so what I was gonna say is I think that people don't really, you said like this ideal citizen. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think I kind of do. It's the ideal citizen thing doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily ideal citizen. It's like what traits do people have, and that like that everyone's ideal citizen usually comes from like the groups they belong to, right?
I mean,
So,
kind of. Like I would say,
if
like
you're a Christian, then your ideal citizen might be Christian. If you're white, then your ideal citizen might be white, right? Or if you're like a
Well,
white
it depends on
nationalist,
how nationalist your
like
system is, and it also
like
depends on
everyone's
how free your
ideal.
society is.
Probably want to say like
Everyone's
ideal
ideal
person or something.
ideal citizen, ideal person, right? That we like that they have when they go to make decisions for individual people are going to be based on like the individual people who they value in their
Well,
life.
but we live in like a freer society, so like there's a lot more variety to what like the model citizen might be for a variety of people and whatnot. But like historically speaking, and generally speaking, throughout his society and or throughout history rather, you will find that most countries that have a relatively centralized society would have this model that everybody would strive for. I mean, not to cite.
But I don't know, because like we could talk to people like Nicholas Fuentes, and his model citizen would be like a white guy who doesn't like any black people, right? Like,
Sure, but he's. I mean, there's always an outlier, right? There's always
outliers
like
are exactly.
I mean,
Like
there's
Yeah,
just
we
gonna be like
define like the American dream or something, right?
there's
Like we
always
have
an
generic
exception,
terms
right?
for this, right?
like you have the house, the yard, the 2.5 kids, whatever.
I guess.
and I guess the other thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry, I
No, go ahead, finish up.
The other thing I wanted to say was like, so I agree with you that like meritocracy could be taught, but I think like a lot of times when we think of meritocracy, it's like, oh, you should focus on like learning as much as you can and like performing and getting good performance numbers, right? And that's not always the thing that ought be taught, right? Like something that I think a lot of people miss is one of the most valuable things about like going to college. A lot of people think that if you sit in class and you get good grades and you go through college, you'll leave and you'll be making 100K a year at the end, right? And then they get out of college and they make 50K a year and they're all upset that they're not
Well, I
living
mean,
the lifestyle
that's
they
why
want.
the millennials were
And
taught. Yeah, that's true.
And the reason that happens is we taught this idea that like if you perform well in school, you'll do well. But like, and that's like comes from the concept of a meritocracy. When in actuality, the people who do the best in college are the people who do things like make friends, network, like take advantage of opportunities in your college, take advantage of your professors, and like try to like network yourself into a position afterwards. And these are usually what college is really good for.
So not do the best
fields.
in college. You actually
Sometimes.
mean do like get the most out of college, or the folks who do the things
not do the best, like not do. Well, I mean,
So
both. Yeah, like not necessarily get
Yeah.
the best grade. Like getting the best grades doesn't, or learning all the material isn't the only thing you ought get out of college.
I mean,
right?
college is most
Because,
the
like,
personal connections are
grades-
what's.
Yeah,
they're
personal
valuable
connections,
too,
or
right?
even like internships, right? Like
I
a
would
lot
say
of people-
primarily the personal connections are like
Yeah,
a big
they're
thing.
incredibly
Like,
valuable, right?
So Brento,
Like-
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want so like we're talking about meritocracy and whether or not we should teach it, right? And I mean, I think like talking about it in school and in the concept of grades is very important. And it's like, you could say like, oh, getting good grades is good merits, which it is, right? But I mean, there's ways to get good grades. You can cheat, but we've already kind of like when you're talking about in school and getting good grades, you say cheating is wrong, and so we don't include that, right? Because if you cheat on a test or if you cheat in a subject or something like that, you're passing the class and you're getting the grade, but you're not like obtaining the knowledge, so you won't be able to pass the next class. Like ideally, if you learn, right? If you learn what you need to learn in the class, then you can pass that class and all future classes. So that would be knowledge, would be like what you consider merit. And if you're not cheating, right, and you're studying, but you're not getting good grades, then you would have to say, okay, well, I need to change the way that I'm studying. And if you change the way you're studying and you got better grades, then that has merit. And that's kind of like when I say like merit, that's when you can apply that concept to everything. That's meritocracy. And I can't see anything functioning at all unless you are able to like not in
see, the
jobs,
thing
not in personal
is,
relationships or anything like that.
how many people get jobs that are associated with their college degree? How many people actually use the knowledge that they even learned in college to do the jobs that they've gotten? Like,
But that's more
there's
about the
an
value of
actual
college, not the
And
value of
I actually
meritocracy.
want to go one step further. There's a lot of folks who have excellent credentials who aren't hired for jobs because they'd be too expensive, right? Like there's that other side to it. So like merit is definitely not the primary indicator of whether you're going to get work or not. I would argue that again, it's money and connections with some merit involved. I'm not saying that merit's completely removed. I'm just saying that
anything that's too
connection.
expensive is not as valuable, though, right? I mean, you could be the
Right.
best at anything, but charge $10 million, it doesn't matter. So you
Right.
always have to be within reason.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not even within reason. Like if you worked in a field like your entire life, like not to dox my father-in-law, but my father-in-law had like, a lot of credentials working in the tech field, so much so that his regular rate is more than like the VPs of some companies, right? So like when he was looking for a job, he was not getting hired because he was way too good at what he does, right? So I would say that like the merit is significantly outweighed by how awesome he was, or how what his value would actually be, right? So again, I mean, I guess I'm repeating myself here. I'm just going to say like the money and the personal connections, like if he actually networked with some of these individuals, maybe he would have gotten these roles anyway.
Well, maybe it
Like,
sounds like he
could it
had
be that he
skills that
wasn't-
nobody really needed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
could
mean,
it be
yeah,
that he
relative to the
was
market.
like way too good at the job, or that he was requesting pay that they couldn't pay, or they didn't think was worth his skills?
Well, I mean, like he works in a very niche field, and he was probably one of the few people that could do the job that was being asked
Yeah,
of.
so he was
So-
requiring a lot of pay for the skill.
Right.
And
So
they
like,
weren't
they
willing
had
to
a
pay it. So
right,
the issue
so they had
wasn't
to
that he was
evaluate.
really good at it. It was just that he was requesting too much, more than they were willing to pay.
Well,
Yeah.
right. And I mean, if you have but I mean, if it's merited, like if you have a specialized skill that not many people can fill, then it should cost this much. And the business has to choose whether they're actually going to pursue this line or if there's just too much for them to pursue, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't fit the
I don't think
need. So
so.
I mean, to say
Yeah.
that it's not reflecting his merit, it just means his costs weren't relative to the need that they were requiring. Not that he couldn't do it, right?
Right, exactly. So what I'm saying is like the financial aspect of that issue took more precedent than his ability to do it.
Man, I
Correct.
could learn like every single detail about like Dungeons and Dragons ever, but like the time and effort that I put into doing that isn't going to translate into like pay. Like that just means that I have a skill that's just not valuable.
Transferable, right? Yeah, some people are fluent in Klingon, but it doesn't matter.
Well, unless you're a Star Trek scriptwriter, I guess.
Oh, there you go. It's a very niche.
Or I could be like really good at chess, and it wouldn't pay well unless you're a professional chess coach or something. Pay for lessons. But I actually wanted to. Oh, I lost my thought. All right, keep going. Sorry. Oh, I remember my thought. Okay, I got it. So I actually wanted to divide this study of meritocracy. I feel like we're talking about two very different things when we're actually addressing it. We're talking about the act of teaching what merit is versus what meritocracy is as a whole. And I think these bills that Doobie brought up is referring to the meritocracy as a whole and not the concept of instilling merit in students. So I think we should talk about the latter rather than the former.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying, just so I can make sure I'm understanding where the conversation's about to go, you're saying it would be okay to teach people to like, work hard, do things that are going to like breed success, but not teach people that we have a system that necessarily is reflecting everybody's efforts. Is
Right.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like due to racism or sexism or whatever else. Like it's basically like the lessons that are being forbidden here are lessons like, well, your merit's going to be good, but because you're from this class or this group, you'll have a harder time actually pursuing this career or that.
Do we want to tell? I guess it depends, right? I've been trying to bounce this concept around in my head as to like, do we want a meritocracy? And like, so I'm imagining an elementary school class and like teaching them those values that are saying that you should work hard and that work will be rewarded and you can fly as high as you want. I didn't want my little girl to like get that lesson, right? Like to say that yes, if you do your best, then people will recognize you for your efforts. Now the reality of the situation is my little girl, well, it's going to be a girl, and then also black, and those two things will work against her, right? But at the like what, and then what am I supposed to? What should I tell her otherwise? Right?
Yeah, it's like, what's the alternative, right?
Yeah.
So like, do you
There's
tell her,
nothing.
hey, because you're born a female and black, your life is going to be much harder. You're not going to succeed no matter how hard you try. If you try really, really hard, the white kid next to you who's trying half as hard is still going to do better than you. Like, is that really like a healthy thing to teach a kid? Like,
I mean, so I'll tell. Like, I don't know what race or anything you are, Doobie, but like in the black community, this is like a conversation that's very often had. It's like
yeah, that seems like a really negative
and
thing.
it's even had in the framework of like a meritocracy. It's like, hey, like you're black, and it sucks, and you're going, and the conversation isn't never that you can't make it, right? The conversation is that you're like, you need to work hard to what you can do, but your white friend might not have to work as hard as you do. So you are going to have to work twice as hard. And I think that's like, and I like, should we have to have that conversation with minorities? Well, no. But like,
do you think that builds
regardless of-
resentment though?
So I mean, like,
so do you think that could build resentment for the white kid who has to work less hard, maybe? But that's not his fault. That's not because he's done anything bad to you. It's just he was born. He happened to be born white. But do you think that line of thinking might breed resentment toward?
I mean, I'm
toward that
gonna
white
play
kid?
my.
There's nothing wrong with.
I'm
There's
gonna play
nothing.
a privilege card real quick. I'm gonna use my parenting card. Just put it down real quick. So I'm actually dealing with this issue, right? Like I've got 2 kids right now, and my oldest is at an age where we're kind of getting into things like ambition and whatever else, and she's saying, "I'm going to be the best this," or "I'm going to be the best that," right? And I guess like I have this unconscious connection between merit and ambition. So I want to encourage the ambition because I think ambition is like it's an important value to me. I think it's important to shoot for the stars and see where you land, right? But I'm also going to talk about with her how merit is overlooked due to things like the types of things we're talking about, like personal connections, money, socioeconomic status. Like race obviously is going to be a big one, although I mean we'll see. I mean I can't imagine living in a place that doesn't. I'm going to try to live in places where race is like as little involved as possible. We'll see how that goes, I guess. But generally speaking, I'm going to teach merit, but I'm also going to teach like the limitations of merit. And I think like going hand in hand, she'll be relatively stable as a result. Did I? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean that to be a conversation.
I think that's really good. I think it's I guess that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Is that like I know from like the conversations that I had with my dad before he passed away that like these are conversations that can be had in ways that like don't necessarily have to build resentment and don't necessarily have to like be negative. We can teach our children that like you like from a personal standpoint should always work as hard as you possibly can, and that's the best you can do, right? You can't work harder than you possibly can. That's not possible. And you shouldn't work less than you can, right? Like you should always try your best. At the same time, we should teach people that when we make rules for how society should run, we have to take into account that not everybody who works as hard as they can has the same ability to like grow within society, and that people make mistakes. And when people make mistakes, some people's mistakes are punished more. I don't think these things are necessarily incompatible.
Yeah, but I don't think that's like necessarily like a minority thing either. Because I mean, there are plenty of white kids.
A minority thing. That's
there are plenty of like white kids born to poor parents, right? Who are like maybe like meth heads or whatever, right? Who might also get that talk like, "Hey, life is shit. You need to work really hard, as hard as you possibly can to make your life better, right? You need to go to school. You need to do the yada yada, right?" So I don't see like what benefit there is in saying that. You need to work really hard. That white kid, they don't have to work as hard as you. Like when you're crossing that line, it just seems like it's gonna lead to building resentment that seems irresponsible.
The problem with that statement, right, is that so what happens is people go out into the real world, and one day Prime's black daughter. Do you actually have a daughter? But his hypothetical black daughter will go out to the real world, and she'll try really, really, really hard. And she'll see someone who's not trying really, really, really hard. And that person will succeed and she will fail or she will fall or she will not do as well. And then like that's what ends up building the resentment, I feel like, is that they're like, oh, well, obviously there is no such thing as merit, right? And that's why you kind of have to teach that like some people might do better because they're in different circumstances.
Okay,
well,
that's
interesting.
Should you also teach that some people might do better because they're taller than you, or they're more attractive than you, or that whatever? Like people have have other advantages, right? That aren't just your skin color.
But well, hold on.
You might be black, but you might be really attractive, and that's going to give you a leg up. Or like an ugly white person wouldn't.
Go ahead,
Brento. Yeah, I was just gonna say, and ultimately, that I mean, what you're saying is exactly correct, David. It's like I'm not saying that won't be the case in some senses, but you also, no one ultimately knows, like, you're like, well, they're not trying as hard and they're doing better. Well, you don't actually know their background. You know where they came from. You don't actually, you don't get to see them at home at night. You don't know how hard they're really trying or what they're putting up with. You don't know everyone's like efforts or stories and everything like that. So that's a judgment you can't ultimately make.
So it's not always going to be about effort.
I think this is interesting because it's again, I don't have a kid, so I'm not exactly sure the best. Even if you do have a kid, doesn't mean you know the best way. But like, so this is just complex, right? Like basically you're teaching them, well, this is life. This is that. That's what that means, right? When people you've gone through something bad and someone says, well, that's life, you know? They're saying that life is complicated and shit happens, right? So like to say that that you shouldn't teach your kids that that your reward, their efforts won't be recognized 100% or fully, right? For all the things that they've done. Well, I understand why not, because then it kind of breeds resentment. Then maybe it tells them, why should I even bother, right? But I'm going to put all this effort in and it's not going to actually recognize, and why should I bother? But at the same time, I'm also for arming kids with all the information they need, right? To understand that, yeah, you know, like people make these decisions and it's unfair. In fact, you've made these decisions about others, right? You've thought like, this is my little girl. Imagine a little girl. You've seen someone else. You thought they were cute, and then maybe you thought that they would be friends with you, that they would think like you, right? Because they're because people who are beautiful are assumed, right, that they share your qualities and your values, right? This is why the best example of this is Ivanka Trump. People people on the left, right, had so many interesting thoughts about what Ivanka would do when she was in the White House, right? And that she would be a moderating force for Donald Trump, right? Because she thinks like us, and like he's the bad one, he's like the ogre, right? But she's just like this princess, and she's gonna be fighting for the people. That was obviously not the case. She's a terrible human being. Just
People
like
actually think this.
I think people were coping.
Never heard that.
people.
Yeah,
I think
never
people
heard
are coping.
I've heard that.
I definitely heard that.
I heard a ton of that.
There's a lot of that.
I heard
and it was
none
the
of that.
media too. It was
Same thing with Melania.
Yeah, and the Melania, exactly the same thing, right? And this was in the media a lot, in left wing media a lot, right? But that was just them, giving that pretty person benefit, right? So this happens, and so I would want my daughter to like understand this, right? I'd want her to understand this, but like I don't know how you teach that in a way that like guarantees doesn't breed resentment.
Well, I mean, like the thing is,
oh man, come on, let me get
of what Prime said and kind of like attack what Doobie said earlier. He brought up like a really, really, really good example. It's these like tall people versus short people, right? And I'm gonna bring this to, like, the example I'm gonna use is like in dating. Like a short guy, right? You tell this guy that you can try as hard as you want to get girls, right? And a short guy might walk up to a girl and he's like, "Oh, you're not 6 foot, get out of my face," right? And what happens when you don't prepare that guy for that situation is he becomes a fucking incel. Okay, this is literally how incels are bred, and like you have to like prepare people for these things. You can't just like let them not be prepared, because otherwise you still end up breeding that same resentment. And I would say the resentment even ends up worse because it's now backed up by life experiences that this was the only way they could explain them.
So I gotta
like prepared to be interrupted all the time.
I gotta like laughing.
Yeah.
I mean,
all right, thank you. So I think like as far as what we're going to be teaching children, where there's maybe a divider here, you can teach your children to work really hard, but then what I think a lot of people typically do, especially if they're trying to pursue a certain field or whatever it might be, is they'll compare themselves to the other people who are trying to do the same thing, and then they'll believe that they just need to do the same thing that this person over here is doing, and then they'll have like similar success, or they might see similar results. And sometimes it's going to be really important to show somebody that that's not necessarily the case, and that doesn't necessarily have to be about like race or gender or anything like that. There could be all kinds of different factors. And so it's really healthy if your kids, if you know that they're not going to have certain like advantages, that they know not to compare themselves to other people. Now, you guys gave anecdotes earlier. I'm going to give a really quick anecdote. When I was pursuing my actuarial path in college, there was about like we'll say a dozen of us who like would study together and work together on a lot of different things. And so of this group of people, I was the only person who had landed an internship at the time. And I had landed an internship because I had passed actuarial exams. And so the people were asking me, or the other people around me were asking me how I did it, and I'm giving them advice on what I did in order to achieve that. There was another guy there who was saying that like he didn't have to pass an exam, he wasn't going to have to do all this. That the things that I was trying to teach them were not true. Okay, and so if you went to college and you listened to this gentleman, you might think that you don't have to pass an exam. You don't need to do all this to get an internship. And an internship is vital to getting a job as soon as you graduate in the actuarial field. Okay. Now, after I kind of hit back on this guy a little bit, because he was like really annoying me, like telling people this, which I felt was just patently not true. And I'd even during my internship helped like hire other interns later on. So I knew what like a lot of places were looking for. This guy had an uncle who worked at a company who was going to hook him up with a job, and this gentleman was completely unaware that his position, or that his future position being secured was simply just because he had an uncle who worked there, and he's screwing up all the other people who he's giving advice to. And so it's really important that you, if you don't have those privileges for your offspring, that you let them know that they're not going to have those advantages, and they know not to compare themselves to other people who might have it easier than them.
That's really, really awful. That's like literally the worst thing I've ever heard. Like, oh, who's gonna? Okay. I was gonna offer my anecdotal thing that goes back to like teaching merit versus ambition. So it's interesting. My parents actually like taught me a lot about ambition, like individually through like their struggles. Like my dad grew up in like low socioeconomic status. My mom was off the boat from Iran and came right in time for the revolution. So like all our financial assets were cut off, and it was like this crazy, like grind to get the degree and survive here without funds, whatnot. But then like they talked about their struggles to get where they were, and like all the things they had to like get past. And so it wasn't a situation where I would like resent folks for having privilege, because they showed me and told me about what their struggles were getting to where they are. And I think if you make it a story like that, where you like, they persevered past struggles versus resenting folks who did like shitty things, you can make that lesson like less embittering.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess topped off, and just to return to what you were saying earlier, like you said, like if there's a guy and like he was shorter, and you don't teach him that he's gonna have trouble with women or something like that, then he could become an incel or become bitter. I mean, I'm not sure if that was hyperbole or not, but it's like I think that in the same token, like if you tell him that outright and you say like this is just the case, that could just as easily breed some kind of resentment among anybody. It seems like if you teach people that they're going to face a barrier no matter what. I mean, if the barrier is there, I guess it could go either way. It could either make them resign to it, in which case they might become resentful, or they can just recognize it and then try and get by it. And I suppose that's an individual choice.
I mean,
yeah,
like,
but what I would say is that like
you'll make it, right? Like you could talk about some people who are short who were like able to do this, that, and the other, and everything's fine.
Yeah,
but
If there's
not to use this example, I think this example.
I mean, you could use people who are dyslexic. They have to struggle twice as hard to read, but they do it anyway, right? Because you have to. And then I know people who are dyslexic, and they're like, I just had to like work twice as hard, but I can do it now. Now I'm really good at it. And it's like, okay, great.
But they're aware, even without you teaching them, they're aware that there is an extra obstacle. Like people are going to figure this out either on their own or being taught beforehand. I don't think there's anything wrong with teaching them some of that beforehand, because they might choose something that maybe has less obstacles or
Sure, that's true.
No, not even that. Like I have a friend who has dyslexia who's a lawyer now. She has to read like all sorts of documentation and all that stuff, and she persevered and made it, right? Like,
or they might like gear up for it and like take it head on. And I think I would rather be prepared for the difficulties that I'm going to face and know that beforehand and take it on head on than just find out too late.
Can we actually redirect to the other? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't really see like the benefit in comparing that way to other people. So I agree that you should tell your children like work as hard as they can, yada yada, with whatever tools they have available. You should tell them that hey, you shouldn't judge other people. right? Because you don't know the struggles. So if someone's not doing as well as you, that doesn't mean they're a bad person. You don't know what's going on in their daily life. But extending that to say that like that white kid over there, they're not going to have to work as hard as you are. There are extra obstacles that you deal with that white kid doesn't have to deal with, because that white kid might have a mother and father that treat them like shit at home, right? They beat them every night. Like
They might
it
not have
doesn't.
a mother and father. You don't know.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. That kid might be dealing with depression or like some other mental health issue, right? So
Yeah,
like
you
it just
shouldn't talk
doesn't.
about the.
Yeah,
you
it
shouldn't
just
talk
doesn't
about
make
the
sense
people
to
that
like.
are privileged. For
In the
sure,
case
right?
of like, the problem is like in the case of the dyslexic kid, right? If you tell this, like telling this kid, hey, it's dyslexic and you're gonna have to work really, really hard, right? And then people like default state is to compare. And like I agree with you, Doobie, that we ought tell people not to compare themselves with others, to some extent. But I think comparison can be important. And when you see, like, when the dyslexic kid goes to school and he sees that everybody else finishes their reading time and finishes reading the chapter in like 5 minutes, and he's sitting there for 10 minutes like struggling through it, like he might feel bad about himself. And if you don't prepare him for something like that, like it could be really bad for his self-esteem. It could cause things like the things you're talking about, like the depression and stuff like that.
You can encourage kids without like pointing out like who doesn't have the.
You don't have to point
struggles.
out specific people, I wouldn't say, but like it's
they'll figure
like
it out.
by virtue of saying like black people have it hard. Like if you look at your black kid and say, hey, because you're African American, you're gonna have it hard. Like the obvious alternative is that people who are not black won't have it as hard, right? And that's why it's like it's very important to also have the conversation. That doesn't mean they don't have struggles or something like that. I think
I mean,
a lot of
you focus on the
online
struggle
miss
more than the. I think you should focus. I think it's important to focus on the struggle more than anything else. But I kind of wanted to go back to the other topic, if that's okay, like the meritocracy versus the merit. Like we're really focusing on this first part of what meritocracy is, which is like the teaching of merit and building meritocracy. But this law again was all about not allowing to discuss the construct of meritocracy, which I think is the greater point between the two topics.
I thought you said.
Am I wrong?
I thought you said the other one was the greater point, the teaching of it, rather than like the concept itself.
Oh, the teaching of the latter.
Okay.
I was definitely into the latter because
the
like,
latter was. This is the former. Never mind. It doesn't matter.
Oh, I should have been more clear. I mean, no, that's interesting though. Like, I'm glad we had this talk about talking about teaching merit, because I got to like reflect on my childhood and stuff. But I really wanted to talk about the meritocracy and whether or not we should discuss it as a social construct, because I think that's like a relatively important topic to teach kids. They should know that like you're going to be told by individuals that this is the only way to succeed, and that is perhaps a lie that stabilizes society, and you should reflect on what your values are, what you want, and get there. I mean, you don't have to call it a lie or anything, but if you're being honest.
I feel like tempered expectations maybe can be somewhat healthy. I mean, you don't want to dash somebody's dreams, but like maybe I don't think that somebody has to necessarily have the ambition to become a billionaire in order to become, a billionaire. There's, I don't know that it's like something that just happens overnight. Like you're like, oh, I'm gonna start Amazon and I'm gonna do it because this is my ticket to being a billionaire. I think that path kind of, as you succeed more and more, that path becomes more available to you. So I would. I guess I wouldn't want my no hold on, let me finish. I'm almost done. So I don't know that I would want like to teach children to like when it comes to those types of extremities necessarily. More realistic hard work examples or merit examples would probably be more relevant.
Right. So like I guess my point is like let's talk about the generalized millennial experience, right? We were told that you go to college, you do really well in college, you get a really fancy job, 2.5 kids, whatever, right? And everything's going to be good. And then like my generation was directly impacted by that crash of 2007, 2008. And they got right after college, they turned out not to be able to have jobs, right? And then more things happened and whatnot. And the folks who went into other fields, like what they were interested in, so like mechanics or plumbing or electrical work, et cetera, were able to score jobs that paid well. And I knew some folks who like turned around houses. They would just like buy a foreclosed house, make it really pretty, and then sell it for 4 times the rate, and that was their career for a while, right? Like, so like the point is that you're teaching folks about what meritocracy actually is. So you're being encouraged to go in a specific direction because there's like societal needs. So like when we were growing up, or when me and presumably anybody else who here is millennial were growing up, we were told go to college, this is what society needs, et cetera, and just being aware that that's not necessarily true, and being aware that you have alternatives that can have merit for you specifically, right? So like we're talking about like what society's expectations are, and how those society's expectations can be impacted by things like the market, by your race, gender, etc. At least that's what maybe that's the nuance I'm going after. I don't know. If I'm seeing a lot of folks looking up, so I feel like
I don't.
my direction was the wrong one. I don't know.
See, I had really shitty parents, right? So I'm trying to remember if I ever got this talk. And I don't know if I did. I mean, I was always expected to do things. And if I didn't get them, I didn't do them, I'd get beaten. But I was never told, hey, you need to work really hard and to have a good life, or whatever the fuck. It was just kind of, I think for everyone in my family, just kind of expected we'd all end up in the ghetto, broke as fuck like everybody else, right? Everybody else in the family. So I don't really have that experience that I can remember. So I'm trying to think like how I talk to my children about this. And I feel like, I probably wouldn't tell them that, hey, because of this and this and this and your height and your skin color and whatever, it's going to be harder for you. I would just say that, like, in fact, I'm like, I guess I'd be called like upper middle class right now. I'm doing very well for myself. So in fact, some people listening in Twitch chat might be telling their children that my children have it easier, right? Because they're born like more wealthy or whatever, right? And might be judging them and saying, "Oh, these kids just don't need to work as hard or whatever." And I don't know, like, it just seems like a really unhealthy mindset to me.
So I guess the question is, do you support this law that's being passed then about teaching meritocracy?
Yeah, I do.
Well,
so to be clear,
than that. I don't know if you want to.
The law said you can't be compelled to teach that meritocracy doesn't exist. Like, you can't be compelled to teach against meritocracy. That was the law.
No, not necessarily. They can't be required to teach that meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist or were created by members of a particular race to oppress members of another race.
Right.
And so this is teaching that the schools can't be required to teach that to children, which I think is a good thing. I think if we start teaching that the idea of like hard work ethic and meritocracy was created by white people to oppress black people, that's a really that seems like a really negative path to go down.
Seems destructive.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, if it's taught with the correct nuance, I'm summarizing the statement for chat.
Like, aren't the 1619 project people like literally the people who are like black people can't do math, and that's why like we ought not like getting the correct answer is harder for black people and they can't do the right thing? Isn't this the same group?
What, the 1619
or maybe not. But
it's not that they can't do math. It's that the way that math is taught is racist or something. I don't remember the exact like math thing. What stood out to me, I think that the foundation of their thing is that 1619, when slaves arrived on the shores of North America, whatever, that was the real founding of the United States, because that moment set like the dominoes for every other like Jim Crow, for fucking the KKK, all the racial destruction that happened in the United States was set in motion in that moment, right? Like the racism even in the Constitution, right, where I think they call it like Indians or Native American savages or whatever. So all that all stemmed from that moment. So that's like what they're known for. That's what they're named after, the 1619 Project. But this is one of the things that they teach. That the concept itself of meritocracy,
getting the right answer, is like racist because black people aren't able to get the right answer as well as white people. I'm not sure. This might not be the same group, but it sounds like awfully a lot like it.
Yeah, let's be very sure on that one. Yeah, I feel like
whatever. I feel like that's not relevant to this.
Yeah.
So like we're talking about teachers not being allowed to require teaching the concept that meritocracy or traits of hard work ethic are racist or sexist, right? Like the idea here is that a teacher can't suggest that this looking for merit can actually be a racist thing. And like that idea,
no, that's not it. It's that the state can't compel a teacher to teach that. A teacher can suggest it, but the state cannot compel it as curriculum.
Yeah, so they can still teach it.
Right.
They just can't like course
so
credit.
it can't be a required curriculum. So that means a teacher can offer to teach it, and then all the kids in the class can bow out if they want.
Again, the exact wording on what this means is disputed, because that's what I thought it was, but
I will destroy Joe Lewis any day of the week on that topic. He's totally full of
Let's
shit.
just say it is, or
Let's
something,
just
right?
say
Let's fine. Okay.
Let's embark.
Teacher or students can choose to just like dip out. Although, how would a teacher have like a 2-week unit on any topic that everybody in the class can just dip out on? Like, why would they teach it in the first place? I feel like the impact of this law is more than what is actually suggested by this law. And like, I don't think that's fair, because then you're basically saying that like you're not allowed to teach how racism or sexism can diminish your merits, right? Like, is that not where this is going?
That's not what it sounds like.
So
It just sounds like they can't.
how are you going to teach that your merits can be diminished by racism and sexism without like violating this?
I mean, you could teach that, but it's just not compelled. It's not required by law to teach it.
Right. So you can have a 2-week unit on how privileges will impair your merits, right? And or other people's privileges are impairing your merits, or how your privileges will like give you additional merit. And if the entire class can just opt out like through like a required like slip and automatically get an A, why wouldn't people just do that, right?
Well, no, they can't give course credit for it. So, but I think that
So it's a pass-fail class that nobody would take.
Because this is K through 12, because this is K through 12, right? It's not like college level that we're talking about. I know that they do have some opt-in classes already, right? Like some opt-in courses or lessons or whatever. So if the school wanted to teach this, if a teacher wanted to teach this, I don't really see a problem with it being opt-in.
So it's like an elective, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it could be like an elective, like an elective course that you could take in high school if you want to do it, but it's not going to count toward your like overall high school grade.
So I guess the question is, if you're forcing this type of study as an elective course,
really nitty gritty, because it's like, well, and there is a lot of interpretation there, because you could say that like, oh, you like maybe it says that children can't get credit for taking a class on this, right? And which it would be like, why would someone ever sign up for a course that doesn't count towards your GPA? That's stupid. Like we ought not incentivize kids to take classes.
Elective courses can provide GPA, can't it?
Yeah, but according to the bill, like
this is saying that it can't,
right?
It can't like, give any credit at all. Toward
it can't give a
well, then why would anybody take?
Yeah.
This is like a pointless class then.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their parents are really into fomenting hatred between black and white people, and they want to take this class.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, all right.
The bill is a lot. Like I said, the bill's a lot. Like we could talk about the bill. I haven't done I've heard about it before, but
my problem is that I feel like
the bill
I feel like we might be giving
a lot of standards about talking about things like white supremacy and
Primus talk.
Yeah. Sorry. I feel like we might be giving misinformation, and I literally don't know.
I think we're getting into the weeds on the bill itself. I don't think we should do that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert enough in this law to.
I would actually, Prime, I would actually love it if you set up maybe an open panel where Joe will come on and he and I can talk about the bill in detail, because I read through like 6 times yesterday.
Okay.
And earlier today to just make sure I knew what I was talking about.
Okay.
And there was no reason not to support this bill.
Oh, I see. You can prepare yourself for this discussion, but then I can't do the research that I need to do to properly understand it. All right.
Yeah, if I knew that's what we were talking about, I would have done
mean,
research on that.
Hold on, but like I said earlier,
meritocracy. Wow.
See how merit works?
Hold on. Like I said earlier, this conversation wasn't really about the bill itself. It's more about the concept of meritocracy, right? And I think that's what we've been talking about. We haven't really been
right. So, generally speaking, I think we can discuss it. I am still in the position that meritocracy is something of a mythical thing that does not fully encompass our society. I would say maybe if I had to give a percentage, which is totally not the right way of doing this at all, I would say merit counts for 20 to 30% of what happens, and then like a lot of it's like your connections, your money, and your luck, right? And luck can be just like the superfluous thing that is just everything else, right? Um, that being said, we teach this concept of merit as a standard in our society to motivate folks to work hard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this idea of teaching folks to work hard without giving them the understanding that this hard work has boundaries and like a big old asterisk next to it is grossly unfair for the students. I mean, this is clearly political.
I just think
more to it than that, though.
Unfair.
Like, so like, okay, look, if you look at your, if you want to think about like whether or not your kids or your family is going to do really well, understanding the reality of the system that you live in, and then being able to teach them the reality of the system that they live in is really important. So, for instance, I can save a shitload of money. I'm not going to have kids. I have nephews though. I can save a shitload of money and I can put aside a lot of investments, and then I can pass that on to them, and then I can teach them about how to operate money and how to live in a life where they don't have to work really hard and they don't have to build this like fucking ridiculous merit and work like 60 hours a week or whatever the fuck everybody else is doing. And I can try and get them set up and get my family set up, the other people in my family set up so that they can have an easy life going forward. I think this is a lot of people who have generational wealth do. I think it's really important to understand the reality of that situation so that your kids are not having to go through the grind that everybody else is.
I mean, I think that's fair, but like again, like talking about this bill and specifically what it's like taking away, like this is forcing this to be done by like an individual basis. It's forcing parents to have the burden of responsibility on a topic that they might not have the nuance on.
No, I'm not talking about the bill. I'm just talking about the concept of meritocracy.
Sure.
Yeah. Like I think we should move away from the bill. I think and I personally think that like it's very I think it's very easy to say something like hard work pays off, right? Like if you want to be rewarded, you need to work hard. And you can leave it at that. But like there's other like words in that statement. I'm not necessarily where Mad Latin is, where it's like 20% merit and that like everything is like nepotism and like favoritism and luck. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And we could have that discussion. But like in general, I would say like we would both agree that like it's like hard work pays off, but like hard work doesn't equally pay us off, right? It pays off like differently for different people. Hard work, like the same amount of work might not do the same thing for different people. And like you can try to teach this as like, I guess the Doobie like suggests is that you instead of teaching them about the way that the world is, that like you ought not compare yourself to other people. But at the end of the day, if we want like when we're teaching the next generation, we're teaching the next generation of voters, we're teaching the next generation of lawmakers, right? And I think we should all recognize the importance of when it comes to making laws and passing policies, that it's very important to like see that some people are at disadvantages and that disadvantaged groups need disadvantaged amounts of help and stuff like that. And these are things that should absolutely be taught because like not only are these people going to be the next lawmakers, but they're also like children are absolutely the next voters, and voters need to know this just as important. And if everyone should vote, then like everyone should learn this.
Doobie?
So really quickly, it's just to kind of add on to what Top Dolphin said. I think that a society that prizes merit or seeks meritocracy is probably going to be a society that tries to level out those places where the playing field isn't equal, right? I think this is why people push for like universal education, or free education, things like positive discrimination. Right, it's because we want a meritocracy, or we're striving toward a meritocracy. We see those places where merit is not the decider and who wins, and we want to pull those people up, or to help those people get to the place where it is. That being said, really quickly, I just want everybody in chat here to know that Prime asked Joe if he'd have that discussion with me about the Texas bill that Joe hates so much and says is racist and all this kind of nonsense, and Joe refused to debate me, because Joe is a pussy, and he just doesn't know as much as he says he does. I'm sorry to tell you.
I don't endorse I don't endorse that message, but okay.
I mean, I would like to see this debate. But I mean, I guess like if we really need to have it, I guess I could do some research since I didn't have time to do it, and then I could show you like, how this shit
That sounds
goes.
fun. Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, Doobie.
What
I
if you
mean,
do the
let's go.
research and you end up agreeing with Doobie?
Well, then I'd be like, ah, man, Doobie, you're right about the whole thing. I guess we can't have this debate.
I'm
But
I'm literally always right. You guys just gotta admit it.
yeah, I mean,
Let's
I don't think I agree with. I'm trying to figure out like in what scenario would I want like even approach agreeing this concept, where like the state legislature is like literally trying to censor teachers on like a fact of life, right? Like it seems ridiculous to me.
Okay.
I mean, okay, so it's like when you're talking about like you say like hard work is you said I don't know how much you'd stick the number. You said like hard work is like 20% and the rest is like environmental
20% as like the lowest, and I gave like a range.
Sure.
And
I would
picked a random
say
number.
hard work is the way you overcome all obstacles. So it's like it feels like the curriculum and like kind of what you're advocating for is to teach people that they have barriers that hard work can't overcome. And I don't agree with that.
That's not true
Like
at all. I wouldn't actually suggest a curriculum that specifically stated that hard work is 20%. I mean, I'm like literally pulling numbers out of my ass,
it's
like
like
as I said before. But what
I
I
would just say, okay, go ahead. I would just say it's like with it, not the 20% is like, I mean, it doesn't have to be the correct number or anything. My point is like, regardless of all obstacles, hard work, whether that's studying, that doesn't just mean flipping burgers 80 hours for your whole life. And then you're like, well, that was hard work. No, it's like studying. It's like if you have obstacles, you have to then figure out why those obstacles are there or how to overcome them, or it means talking to people. It might mean networking, and like for some reason we've decided that networking is outside of meritocracy, but networking means working with other people and establishing relationships, and that's part of hard work and getting beyond the barriers. And so those are all things that I think are encompassed in the concept of work to overcome these types of barriers, and I think they all fall under meritocracy. Basically anything that you do to achieve your goal has merit, right? And you have to work hard towards that. And this idea that you're going to like teach a curriculum that says like
well,
you can't overcome these types of
I didn't
things.
say
It's
that.
like
I would say that like hard work. Okay, so if we're gonna be a little bit more specific here, I would suggest that hard work is a multiplier of a lot of different factors. So if you work really, really hard and you landed a job that you have like some interest in and some specialty in, you will do really, really well. And if you work hard at a job that doesn't pay particularly well, you'll be able to move up in a company that doesn't necessarily do a lot. I remember actually, I have a fantastic anecdote on this, since this is the anecdote panel. I worked in a restaurant for like 6 months, right? And I was the shittiest, like by far the slowest prep cook you have ever seen in your life. Like I was given a knife, it was a giant knife that I was supposed to cut like 20 pounds of vegetables with, right? And like all the Mexicans in the restaurant were calling me Tortuga because I was slow as fuck. Like I was bad, right? And like I was still getting paid more than everyone else, and I felt like I didn't deserve it, and I quit the job, whatever else. I think there's like some sort of legality thing going on with the whole how pay was being
They were
decided.
probably illegal. Yeah.
So there was like some things that were going on there, but they worked their asses off. I've never seen people work as hard as the rest of the staff at this restaurant. So they worked their asses off. Like there's this guy, Lorenzo, who was like so fucking baller at like he knew the recipes down cold. He could create and prep anything like instantaneously, and he was the highest paid just prep cook that wasn't he was like the leader, if you will, and he was making progress within the company, and he was always being put on the schedule. I was being put on the schedule very like infrequently, right? So like hard work was getting Lorenzo places within the business. However, that hard work was not doing as much for him if compared to like let's say he was in a field where he could move up to like say partner in a law firm or
Sure.
like store manager at like wherever, right? So I think I think it's perfectly fair to say that hard work is a multiplier and critical for meeting success. Like I'm not the strongest chess player on the planet. I probably like the 90 percentile for my state, and probably somewhere, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm like a really strong chess player, but not the strongest. And hard work has gotten me to the point where I'm like, able to teach these lessons, and I'm able to like, get good reviews from my customer base, whatnot. So like, I definitely think hard work is something to be valued. And I would never suggest a curriculum that was anti-hard work. But I think reality is a very important thing to teach too. And I think teaching hard work as a multiplier rather than like just something that'll automatically give you that golden or silver spoon, whatever metaphor you want, is irresponsible.